The summer of 1764 was warm in the hills of southern France. A young woman tended her cattle near the village of Langogne. She watched the tree line, the way shepherds always did. Something moved there, low and patient, and then it charged. Her dogs scattered. The cattle lowered their horns and drove the thing back into the brush. She survived, shaking, with a story no one quite believed. Within weeks, others would not be so lucky. You might assume this is a simple tale of wolves and frightened peasants. A hard winter, hungry animals, a few tragic deaths in a poor mountain province. That is the tidy version. But the truth was far stranger and far harder to explain. For 3 years, something hunted the region of Gevaudan, in the rugged uplands of south-central France. It killed close to 100 people, and to this day, scientists still argue about what it actually was. The land itself helped the killer. Gevaudan was remote, rocky, and thinly settled. Steep ravines cut through cold plateaus and dense forest. Roads were poor, and villages sat far apart. The people were mostly herders, scraping a living from thin soil. Their children worked as shepherds, alone, watching flocks on open hillsides. That detail matters more than anything else in this story. The first confirmed death came in late June of 1764. A 14-year-old girl named Jeanne Boulet was killed while watching sheep. Her body was found torn and partly eaten. The attacks did not stop. They spread across the parishes, week after week, month after month. Witnesses described something larger than any wolf they knew. They spoke of a broad chest, a long tail, and reddish fur marked with dark stripes. By some accounts, the creature stood as tall as a calf. It had a wide head, a flat muzzle, and teeth that left terrible wounds. Survivors said it moved with unnatural speed and cunning. It seemed to target the throat and the face. Sometimes it carried off heads. Stranger still, it often ignored the sheep and went straight for the shepherd. That behavior unsettled everyone. Wolves of the time avoided people. They feared the smell of humans and kept to the dark. This animal did the opposite. It approached on open ground, in daylight, and it chose people over easy prey. To frightened villagers, that could only mean one thing. This was no ordinary beast. Rumors moved faster than any horse. People whispered of a werewolf, a loup garou in the old French phrase. Some believed it was a punishment sent by God. Others thought a sorcerer controlled it, or that the devil walked the hills in animal form. Priests preached about sin and divine wrath from their pulpits. The fear was not only of teeth and claws, it was the fear that nature itself had turned against them. The story climbed out of the mountains and into the capital. Newspapers in Paris began printing accounts of the killings. They added engravings of a monstrous creature, half wolf and half something else. Each retelling made the beast larger and more demonic. France was reading about a single animal terrorizing a kingdom, and the kingdom had a king who could not ignore it. King Louis XV ruled a France obsessed with reputation and order. A monster running loose, mocking his soldiers, was a humiliation. It made the crown look weak before its own people. So the king did something remarkable for a single rural province. He committed real money, real men, and royal attention to the hunt. He sent professional wolf hunters into the hills of Gévaudan. The first were a father and son, Jean-Charles and Jean-François Deneval, famous across France for killing wolves. They arrived with trained dogs and years of experience. They expected to find a clever wolf and finish the job quickly. Instead, they found a landscape that swallowed them. The terrain hid the animal at every turn. The killings continued while the hunters searched empty valleys. To be honest, what struck me most was how the beast seemed to learn. It avoided the traps. It shifted its hunting grounds. It struck where the hunters were not. And as the failures piled up, the king grew impatient, and the fear in Paris grew louder. The king replaced the Denevals with a new man, Antoine de Beauterne, his own gun-bearer. Antoine arrived in 1765 with soldiers and a plan. He organized vast beats, driving the forest with hundreds of men. In September, he shot an enormous wolf near the Abbey of the Chasses. It was a huge animal, far larger than a normal wolf. Antoine had its body stuffed and carried to the royal court at Versailles. The king was pleased, the hunters were rewarded, and the case seemed closed. But here is the part most people do not know. The killings began again. Within weeks of the celebration, new bodies appeared in Gevaudan. The court had declared victory, yet the beast still hunted the hills. The official story and the bloody reality no longer matched. The province was left to solve its own nightmare. The end came from a local man, not a royal hunter. His name was Jean Chastel, a farmer from the parish of La Bessière-Sainte-Marie. In June of 1767, he joined a large hunt across the slopes of Montmouchet. By legend, he waited calmly and shot the creature as it came toward him. When the animal fell, the attacks finally stopped. Whatever Chastel killed that day, the long terror of Gevaudan was over. So what was it, really? That question has never been fully answered. The simplest explanation is also the most likely. It was a wolf, or several wolves, hunting in a region full of vulnerable children. Wolves of that century were larger and bolder than the few that survive today. Hunger, habit, and easy prey can push a predator toward people. Lone shepherds, small and unarmed, were the easiest targets of all. That grim logic explains why most victims were children and women. Yet the simple answer never fully satisfied people, then or now. The descriptions were strange, and the wounds did not always look like wolf work. Some researchers have proposed a hyena, perhaps an escaped exotic animal. Others suggest a hybrid, a cross between a wolf and a large dog. A few point to a man, using a trained animal to hide deliberate murders. None of these ideas can be proven, and none can be ruled out completely. The bodies are gone, the stuffed wolf was lost, and only the records remain. Modern historians read those records carefully, counting the dead and mapping the attacks. By most estimates, the Beast of Gévaudan killed between 60 and 100 people. It wounded many more and left an entire province in terror for 3 full years. The exact number will never be certain, because old parish records are incomplete. What is certain is the human response, and what it reveals about fear. A single animal, or a few of them, pulled the attention of a king. It filled newspapers across Europe and emptied the hills of working shepherds. The story shows how quickly fear can outgrow the thing that caused it. People did not only battle a predator, they battled their own imagination, their loup garou, their sense that the world had turned hostile. The science, in the end, is almost ordinary. Wolves are intelligent, adaptable, and capable of learning to avoid hunters. A predator that shifts its range and times its strikes is not supernatural. It is simply doing what a clever animal does to survive. That is why the royal hunters failed for so long. They were chasing a real animal, but they were fighting a legend. The two were never the same size. Today, Gevaudan is a quiet corner of France, now part of the Lozère region. Tourists come to see statues of the beast and to walk the old hills. The wolves are mostly gone, and shepherds no longer fear the tree line. But the story still draws people, because it sits at a strange border. It is the place where biology meets myth, where a hungry animal becomes a monster. We want our monsters to be extraordinary, and nature rarely obliges. Think back to that young woman near Langon, watching the tree line in the warm summer. Her cattle saved her, and she carried her story home. Around her, a kingdom would build a legend that outlived every hunter and every king. The beast itself was likely flesh and fur, hunger and instinct, but the fear it left behind was something humans made entirely on their own. And in the quiet hills of Gevaudan, the wind still moves through the same dark trees.